What if the forests and fields you played in as a child were never truly empty? What if the folklore of gaunt, pale creatures watching from the tree line wasn't myth, but a suppressed memory of our oldest, deepest fear? The fear of being watched by something that has no business in our world. This is Verified Nightmare, where every story is a case file, and every horror is verified. Tonight, we document 11 distinct encounters with an entity that has gone by many names across decades and continents. Skinwalkers, the Rake, Pale Crawlers. But the evidence points to a singular, terrifying phenomena, a creature of impossible anatomy and predatory patience. These are not campfire tales. These are first-hand accounts, backed by police reports, forensic analysis, and multiple witness testimonies that chillingly corroborate the same horrific details. We have compiled the 11 most credible, most disturbing true crawler sighting cases ever recorded. From the declassified accounts of forest rangers to the harrowing 911 calls of families under siege, we will piece together a portrait of a predator that lives in the periphery of our reality. What you are about to hear will change how you see the dark outside your window. It will make you question every rustle in the bushes, every odd shape in the mist. The common thread in these stories is not just the description of the creature, but the profound psychological shift it forces upon those who see it. A realization that the world is far stranger and far more dangerous than we were taught. If you are ready to confront the verified truth, hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. Because what waits in the shadows is patient, and it is always learning. This is 11 most scary true crawler sighting horror stories. The Watcher of Highway 98. Mark Thornton was a 34-year-old long-haul trucker, a man who measured his life in miles per gallon and cross-country routes. His rig, a 2016 Peterbilt 579, was his second home, meticulously clean and equipped with the high-end dash cam system he installed himself after a minor collision 2 years prior. The footage from that system, time-stamped and unedited, forms the core of the official investigation. His regular run took him along the sparsely populated stretches of Highway 98 in the Florida Panhandle, a route he found peaceful under the vast, starry skies away from the city lights. The incident began not with a sighting, but with a feeling. In his statement to the Lafayette County Sheriff's Office, Thornton reported a growing, unexplainable sense of being watched during his night drives through the Apalachicola National Forest segment of his route. It started in early October, he noted in his personal logbook, a document later entered into evidence, the strange disappearance of Roadkill. A possum he denoted on westbound trip would be gone on his eastbound return a night later, not scavenged, but vanished. Then came the radio interference. His CB would crackle with bursts of static at the same 2-mile marker every night for a week, a phenomenon confirmed by a review of his dash cam's audio track. No other truckers reported similar issues on the channel. On the night of October 17th, the feeling escalated. Thornton was eastbound at approximately 2:14 a.m. The forest was a black wall on either side of his headlight beams. According to the police report, he first saw a pale, fleeting shape in his side mirror, keeping pace in the tree line just off the shoulder. He assumed it was a trick of the light, a piece of fog, but then his dash cam, facing forward, captured it. A figure, emaciated and stark white under the infrared glow of the camera's night vision, darted across the road 200 yards ahead. It moved on all fours in a frantic, scuttling gait, but its limbs were all wrong, too long, too jointed. It cleared the 2-lane highway in less than 2 seconds and vanished into the opposite tree line. Thornton, shaken, pulled over at the next gravel turnout. He called dispatch, his voice steady but strained, a recording of which was retained by his trucking company. He was explaining what he saw when he made the decision to check the exterior of his rig. With his high-beam flashlight in hand, he stepped out. The dash cam, now recording an empty cabin, captured his muffled voice saying, "What the hell is that?" Then, a sharp intake of breath. What the forward-facing camera did capture, in the upper left corner of its frame, was a reflection in Thornton's side mirror. It showed the tree line behind the truck, and there, Standing perfectly still and fully upright between two pines was the creature. It was tall, easily 7 feet, with a gaunt, muscular frame devoid of any hair. Its head was oblong, with large, dark sockets where eyes should have been. It was turned, watching the truck, watching him. The image is pixelated, but unmistakable. Forensic analysis of the video confirmed no evidence of digital tampering. Thornton scrambled back into the cab, threw the truck into gear, and sped away. He filed a formal report with the sheriff's office the next morning. Deputies accompanied him to the site. They found no physical evidence, no prints, no disturbed foliage. But the dash cam footage was compelling enough to be entered into the county's unusual incidents log. The case was never officially solved, attributed to fatigue or a possible prank, despite Thornton's impeccable record and the tangible evidence of his video. The aftermath is where the verification deepens. The sheriff's office, perhaps as a courtesy, shared the still image from the mirror reflection with 2 neighboring counties. Washington County authorities recognized the description. It matched in startling detail an unrelated report from a Forestry Service worker 6 months prior, who described a tall, white, naked thing watching him from a burnt-out stand of trees, a report that had been filed and largely dismissed. Furthermore, a clerk at a truck stop 50 miles down Highway 98 confirmed to investigators that 3 other drivers, all independent of each other, had made offhand comments about seeing a weird white thing in the woods near that forest stretch over the preceding year. Their logbook signatures and fuel receipts placed them there. Mark Thornton requested a permanent route change. He still drives, but only during daylight hours and never through that section of national forest. The official case file remains open, labeled as a suspicious incident. The most chilling detail, one that haunts Thornton, is a footnote in the deputy's report. When asked to estimate the creature's distance in the reflection, Thornton stated it was no more than 30 yards from his position. When asked what it was doing, his reply was simple and forever etched in the record. It was just standing there, learning the shape of my truck. The thing in the culvert. Lena Petrova was a 28-year-old civil engineer, recently relocated from Kyiv to oversee a rural drainage project in the farmlands of southern Alberta. Her world was one of concrete specifications, soil erosion reports, and geometric precision. The project was a county mandate to replace a series of aging, collapsing culverts, large drainage pipes beneath a network of remote gravel service roads. Her temporary housing was a small, county-provided trailer parked near the primary worksite, a fact noted in her company's project logs. The inciting incident was a matter of infrastructure. On the morning of May 12th, her crew discovered that the newly installed 96-inch corrugated steel culvert on Parcel 7, a job signed off on just 2 days prior, had been severely damaged from the inside. As she detailed in her official site assessment, the steel was not crushed by external pressure, but deeply gouged, as if by massive, repeated claw strikes. Soil samples showed no sign of heavy machinery access, and the security camera on the materials trailer, reviewed by county police, showed no human trespassers overnight. The camera did, however, capture 12 minutes of corrupted, buzzing static beginning at 3:07 a.m., a glitch the security firm could not explain. Lena, pragmatic, initially suspected wildlife, perhaps a bear, but the claw mark impressions, later cast by a conservation officer, did not match any local fauna. The spacing was too wide, the individual gouges too long and straight, unlike a bear's curved talons. This was the first break in her rational world. Her investigation turned from repair to curiosity. She began reviewing game camera footage from local farmers, which she had access to as part of an environmental survey. On cameras within a 3-mile radius of Parcel 7, she found anomalies. Blurred, fast-moving streaks of pale white at the edge of the frame. Only at night. One camera, positioned over a creek, captured a clear, if brief, image, a skeletal, pale hand with 2 long fingers gripping the creek bank, just before the motion sensor triggered. The buildup was a methodical dismantling of safety. Strange, high-pitched clicking sounds were heard by multiple crew members after sunset, emanating from the fields. Dogs brought to the site by workers would whimper and refuse to enter the drainage ditches. Then, Lena's own trailer became a focus. She would wake to the sound of something dragging lightly along the aluminum siding. Security lights would trigger, showing nothing. One night, she awoke to the distinct sensation of being watched. Through the thin gap in her blinds, she saw two dark, reflective circles set in a pale face, peering into her window from just outside. She froze, and after 10 terror-filled seconds, they vanished. The reveal came from a combination of bravery and technology. After the face at the window, Lena set up a high-resolution, infrared-capable camera on a tripod inside her trailer, pointed directly at the window. She also placed a simple digital voice recorder on the porch. On the night of May 25, the clicking returned, closer than ever. The audio recorder captured it, a complex, chittering series of clicks, followed by a low, guttural vocalization that vibrationally distorted the microphone. The interior camera captured the window again. This time, the creature did not just peek. It pressed its entire head against the glass, distorting its features. The infrared light illuminated it fully. The image, later analyzed by a forensic videographer contracted by the county, shows a hairless, almost featureless face with large, black, pupil-less eyes, a slit for a mouth, and no discernible nose. The head was misshapen, elongated. Lena called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. When they arrived, they found her locked in her vehicle, clutching the camera and the recorder. She presented her evidence: the damaged culvert report, the game camera still, the audio, and the devastatingly clear image from her window. The RCMP took her statement and the evidence seriously. Their report, which we have obtained through access to information request, confirms the evidence was genuine and unexplainable. They conducted a sweep of the area with thermal equipment. They found no sign of an intruder, but their dog unit refused to track near the drainage culverts, a behavior the handler noted as highly unusual. The aftermath and verification are documented in cold, bureaucratic language. The RCMP report concludes that Lena Petrova was the subject of a sustained harassment campaign by an unknown party or parties, but no suspects were ever identified. The county fast-tracked the completion of the drainage project, and Lena was transferred back to the city main office at her request. The physical evidence, the audio file, the images were entered into a non-criminal intelligence file. The culvert on Parcel 7 was repaired, but within a week, the new steel was again gouged from the inside. The county's final solution, as per their public works memo, was to fill that section of the ditch with concrete, abandoning the drainage point entirely. The case was closed. Lena Petrova no longer works field assignments. The chilling, unresolved detail comes from the RCMP forensic audio analysis. Buried in the technical notes is a single line: spectrographic analysis of the low-frequency vocalization suggests a complex structure not consistent with known animal species. The pattern bears a superficial resemblance to primitive phonemes. In simpler terms, the thing outside her window wasn't just making noise. It was, in some horrific way, trying to speak. The radio silence of Station Kvelf. James Jim Wheeler was a 62-year-old retired air traffic controller who found a second career as the overnight caretaker and board operator for Kvelf, a low-power AM radio station serving the remote high-desert community of Millersburg, Oregon. His life was one of comforting routine: the drive into the station at PM, the ritual of brewing a pot of coffee, the precise logging of transmitter data, and playing syndicated nostalgia shows to the handful of graveyard shift workers and insomniacs who tuned in. The station's logs, FEC-mandated and meticulously kept by Jim, form the backbone of this account. The inciting incident was a technical anomaly. On the night of September 8th, at 1:17 a.m., the station's main transmitter, a vintage RCA unit Jim knew like the back of his hand, experienced a sudden, brief power dip. The event was automatically logged by the station's monitoring equipment. No storm was in the area, and the local utility reported no irregularities on the grid. 30 seconds after the dip, the station's landline phone rang. Jim answered to hear only heavy, wet breathing, followed by a series of rapid, clicking sounds. He dismissed it as a prank call, noting it in the log, but then, the station's emergency alert system, which is triggered by a specific 1050 Hz tone from the National Weather Service, activated on its own. It broadcast 10 seconds of dead air, followed by a distorted, whispering voice that, according to Jim's sworn affidavit, said, "Out here. We're all out here." The automation system showed no external trigger. The audio was captured by the station's always running backup recorder, a tape later seized by authorities. The buildup was a systematic hijacking of the airwaves. The strange broadcasts became a nightly occurrence, always preceded by the transmitter power dip. They were snippets, the sound of something dragging over sand and rock, that same guttural clicking, and occasionally, a faint, high-pitched whine that made Jim's teeth ache. He began comparing notes with his friend Roy, the overnight dispatcher for the county sheriff's office. Roy confirmed that on the nights of the broadcasts, they would receive scattered, confused calls from listeners describing disturbing noises on the station's frequency. Crucially, the callers were spread across a 50-mile radius, all triangulating to the transmitter's location on Black Rock Butte. Jim's investigation turned technical. He installed a motion-activated game camera on the station's perimeter fence, facing the vast desert. He began recording the full duration of his shift on a separate digital recorder. On the night of September 22nd, the camera triggered at 2:48 a.m. The image it captured was blurry due to the creature's speed, but it showed a pale, elongated form crouched on the desert floor just outside the fence, its head tilted upwards towards the transmission tower. That same night, his personal recorder captured the ambient sound inside the station's control room. Beneath the soft hum of equipment, a new sound was present, a faint, rhythmic scratching on the station's exterior cinderblock wall, moving from one end of the building to the other. The reveal was both auditory and visual. Determined to catch the source, Jim, with the station manager's reluctant permission, set up a live feed from the game camera to a small monitor on his console. On the night of October 1st, the power dipped. The eerie broadcast began this time. It was the unmistakable sound of something climbing the steel lattice of the transmission tower, a metallic clink 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 growing progressively higher. Jim watched the monitor. The camera, with its limited field of view, showed the base of the tower. A moment later, the creature descended into frame from above, landing in a crouch. It was tall, impossibly thin, with stark white skin that seemed to glow under the starlight. It turned its head, and Jim saw the large, dark eyes fix, not on the camera, but on the station building itself, as if it knew he was watching. It then darted away with that same disturbing, scuttling gait. Jim called the sheriff's office, his voice a controlled panic on the 911 recording. "It's at the tower. It's not an animal. It knows I'm here." The aftermath and verification involve multiple agencies. Deputies found no physical evidence at the tower, but confirmed fresh scuff marks on the steel at a height of nearly 30 feet. The FCC was notified of the unauthorized broadcasts. Their investigation, documented in a non-public advisory memo, confirmed the signals originated from the Kvelf transmitter itself. The rogue audio was being injected directly into the broadcast chain. How was never determined. Jim Wheeler took an immediate leave of absence and never returned to the night shift. The official report lists the events as vandalism and electronic trespassing, though no suspect was ever identified. The chilling, unresolved detail is housed at the County Communications Center. The sheriff's office dispatcher, Roy, kept a personal log. He noted that in the week following Jim's departure, the strange broadcast stopped. However, on two subsequent occasions when new, temporary overnight operators filled in at Kvelf, the dispatchers received silent 911 calls originating from the station's landline. When deputies rushed to the scene, they found the station locked and empty, the phone off the hook in the control room. The final entry in Roy's log reads, "It wasn't he trying to broadcast to everyone. It was trying to talk to him, and when he left, it got lonely." The children of the quarry. Dr. Arise Thorne was a 45-year-old geologist conducting a 6-month mineral survey for a private firm in the old granite quarries outside Barrie, Vermont. A methodical man, he lived in a rented cabin near the survey site with his 2 field assistants, recent graduates named Chloe and Ben. Their days were spent mapping fissures and taking core samples. Their nights spent collating data. The team's field journals and GPS tracking data provide a verifiable timeline of events. The inciting incident was a disappearance of equipment. On July 10th, a case of high-grade rock chisels, a portable seismic monitor, and 3 high-beam headlamps vanished overnight from a locked equipment shed at the primary quarry site. The lock was not broken, but the hasp showed deep, parallel scratch marks, noted in the police report filed the next morning. Wildlife officers ruled out bears due to the scratch pattern and the specificity of the theft. The seismic monitor, which had a weak but functioning cellular transmitter for data, began pinging its location later that day. It was moving, not east towards the road, but deeper into the labyrinthine network of flooded quarry pits and wooded granite canyons. The buildup was a descent into a different world. Aris, against the advice of local authorities, decided to track the signal, reasoning the equipment was vital and expensive. Using handheld GPS units, the team followed the pings into an older, abandoned section of the quarries, an area not on their official survey maps. The environment changed. The pine forests gave way to stunted, twisted trees growing from cracks in the granite. The air grew still and abnormally quiet, absent of bird calls. Chloe's journal entry from that day states, "It feels watched, not by people, by the rocks themselves." They found one of the stolen headlamps, its casing cracked and lens scoured as if by sandblasting, lying at the mouth of a deep, man-made fissure in the quarry wall. The team's growing unease turned to dread over the following nights. They would hear stones clattering down cliff faces with no visible cause. Ben's DSLR camera, left on a tripod overnight to capture time-lapse erosion data, took a series of images between a M and a M that, when reviewed, showed blurred, pale shapes moving at the edge of the flooded pits in the background. Then, the sounds began, a high-pitched, chittering call that would echo between the granite wall, sometimes sounding like it came from multiple points at once. A local game warden, consulted by phone, stated the sound did not match any known fauna in Vermont. The reveal occurred during a desperate recovery mission. The seismic monitor's signal had finally stabilized, indicating it was stationary deep within the fissure network. Aris, fearing liability if the sensitive device fell into the wrong hands, insisted on retrieving it. The team geared up with climbing equipment and descended into a narrow, dark canyon. According to their combined testimonies and the GPS data that tracks their route, they found a small, hidden cavern. Inside, arranged in a crude circle, were the rest of their stolen tools. The seismic monitor was in the center, its casing pried open, its wiring exposed and seemingly rearranged in a nonsensical pattern. As they stood in shock, a rock fell from above, and they looked up. The cavern's ceiling was high and riddled with shadowed ledges. On those ledges, clinging to the granite with long, spidery limbs, were 3 of them. They were smaller than other reports suggested, perhaps the size of a teenager, but shared the same hairless white skin and large, dark eyes. They watched in utter silence. Chloe's whispered statement, captured by the voice memo app she had reflexively opened on her phone and later submitted to police, is barely audible. "Oh God, they're children." The team retreated in a controlled panic. They did not run, a fact that likely saved them. They backed out of the cavern, maintaining eye contact, and did not turn their backs until they were out of the fissure. They drove directly to the state police barracks. The aftermath and verification involved a multi-jurisdictional response. The state police, aided by forestry personnel, conducted a sweep of the area. They confirmed the location of the cavern and retrieved the equipment, which was entered into evidence. No creatures were found. However, the officer's own K-9 unit became highly agitated at the cavern entrance, refusing to enter. The official report cautiously cites possible transient individuals squatting in the quarries as the culprits for the theft, but notes the lack of any human signs: no trash, no bedding, no fire pits. The case was closed due to lack of evidence. Dr. Arise Thorne terminated the survey contract early. The firm's internal report, which we have obtained, cites unsafe site conditions as the reason. The chilling, unresolved detail comes from the forensic analysis of the retrieved seismic monitor. The data it collected during its time in the cavern showed a persistent, ultra-low frequency vibration, a resonant hum emanating from the granite itself, pulsing in a complex, repeating pattern. A consulting seismologist noted in an addendum that the pattern was organized, not natural. Furthermore, the device's memory contains several minutes of audio, recorded by its internal microphone after it was stolen. Among the rustling and clicks is a clear, if alien, attempt at mimicry, a distorted, whispered replay of Arise's own voice from 2 days prior, saying the words, "core sample," and "over here." The creatures weren't just stealing tools. They were learning how to use them. They were learning how to sound like us. The guard post. Mateo Cruz was a 22-year-old private first class in the United States Army, serving a rotation at a remote forward operating base in the Kunar province of Afghanistan. His role was that of a perimeter guard, working the lonely shift from 200 to 400 at Observation Post Delta, a sandbag position 200 yards outside the main wire, overlooking a steep, rocky valley. The events of his deployment are corroborated by his official statement to Army CID, the sworn testimony of his staff sergeant, and the declassified after-action report for that evening, which cites an incident involving possible enemy psychological operations. The inciting incident was a failure of technology. On the night in question, Cruz's standard issue night vision goggles, a P/14 model, began to malfunction. In his statement, he reported the green-hued image flickering, then cutting out entirely for 3 to 5 second intervals. During one of these blackouts, he heard a distinct sound from the valley below, the clatter of several small rocks tumbling down the scree slope. He radioed it in. The base's thermal camera operator, Specialist Davis, scanned the area and reported no heat signatures. The assumption was a natural slide or a small animal. But Cruz, now without his primary optics, felt exposed. He switched to his backup, a small handheld thermal monocular. When he panned it over the same area, he caught a fleeting, cool spot, not the bright white or yellow of body heat, but a stark, dark blue absence of heat moving behind a boulder. It was there for less than a second before vanishing. Thermal doesn't lie. Something that cold, in the ambient night air, was anomalous. The buildup was a silent, psychological siege. After reporting the thermal anomaly, Cruz was ordered to maintain heightened alert. Over the next hour, the phenomena became auditory and sensory. He heard a low, rhythmic clicking, like 2 stones being tapped together, that seemed to move along the base of the valley. The wind, which had been still, began to blow in erratic gusts, carrying a faint, sour odor. He compared in his statement to wet chalk and dried meat. Then, his personal radio earpiece crackled with the burst of static, and a voice, whispered and distorted as if through a poor connection, spoke his last name, Cruz. No one on the net had called him. The radio log confirms no transmission from the base at that timestamp. Cruz's training held. He scanned his sectors, reported each event calmly over the radio. His staff sergeant, monitoring from the command post, later testified to Cruz's professional tone, which made the content of his reports all the more disturbing. The final straw was a physical one. A small, smooth stone arced out of the darkness and landed with a tap on the sandbags directly in front of his firing position. It was followed by another, and another. They were not thrown with force, but with a casual, almost teasing precision. They were coming from multiple, shifting directions. The reveal was a moment of frozen terror. Following protocol for potential enemy probe, a quick reaction force was dispatched from the main base. As the Humvees approached, their headlights swept across the valley floor below Cruz's position. In that sweeping illumination, Cruz saw it. It was crouched on a prominent rock 50 yards away, fully illuminated for 2 full seconds before the light passed. In his CID interview, he described a humanoid figure with ivory white skin stretched taut over a skeletal frame, long arms wrapped around its knees. Its head was large and bald, with oversized, completely black eyes that reflected the headlights not with a shine, but by swallowing the light. It did not flinch or flee. It simply turned its head to track the passing vehicles, then swiveled back to look directly up at Cruz in his guard post. Then the lights were gone, and it vanished into the deeper darkness. The aftermath and verification are a matter of military record. The Kerf found no signs of enemy activity, no tracks, no equipment. Cruz was relieved at his post and debriefed extensively. Army CID investigated the possibility of a hazing incident or a psychological break. But Cruz's record was clean, his talk screen negative, and his equipment aside from the initially faulty night vision was in working order. The stone throwing was confirmed by the finding of 6 small, identical river rocks on the sandbag roof of his post, rocks not native to that immediate, arid area. The after-action report as final conclusion is a masterpiece of bureaucratic ambiguity. PFAC Cruz likely experienced a combination of sensory deprivation, equipment malfunction, and heightened situational awareness resulting in a misidentification of natural phenomena. The case was closed, but the chilling, unresolved detail lies in an annex to that report, a memo from the battalion surgeon. In his standard post-incident interview, Cruz mentioned the whispered radio transmission of his name. The surgeon, as a matter of routine, asked if he recognized the voice. Cruz's response was recorded verbatim, "Yes, sir, it was my own." The creature on the rock hadn't just been watching him. It had learned and echoed the voice it heard over his radio all night. For Cruz, the true horror wasn't the sighting. It was the realization that for an unknown period of time, something had been listening closely enough to perfectly mimic him. The Foundation Inspection. Elena Santos was a 38-year-old county building inspector for the rural municipality of Pine Glen. Her job was one of codes and concrete, of ensuring the safety and stability of homes and structures. The call on November 3rd was routine, a complaint from a new homeowner on Old Ridge Road about persistent dampness and a strange, sulfur-like smell in his basement. The homeowner, Mr. Derek Mitchell, had recently purchased the 1970s split level as a foreclosure. Elena's county vehicle GPS and her inspection schedule confirm her arrival at the property at 10:15 a.m. The inciting incident was a discrepancy in the blueprints. The house, according to the archived county file, was built on a standard poured concrete foundation with a full unfinished basement. Yet, as Elena conducted her exterior walk around, she noted 2 foundation vents on the north side, where the plans showed only one. When she pointed this out, Mitchell seemed genuinely surprised. He hadn't noticed the extra vent. It was a small rusted grate, partially obscured by overgrown juniper bushes. Kneeling to examine it, Elena felt a distinct, cold draft emanating from the darkness within, carrying that same sulfur-tinged odor. Her inspection camera, a flexible fiber optic model, revealed the vent did not open into the basement proper, but into a narrow, earth-walled crawlspace that seemed to extend back under the house further than the footprint should allow. The buildup began when she moved her inspection indoors. The basement was damp, as reported, with a legitimate need for a new sump pump, but the smell was stronger here, localized near the northern wall. Tapping the concrete with her rubber mallet revealed a hollow sound in a section roughly 3 feet wide. Mitchell claimed no knowledge of any voids. Using her camera again, Elena drilled a small pilot hole through the mortar between cinder blocks. The camera feed showed not solid earth behind the wall, but a black emptiness. And on the floor of that hidden space, just at the edge of the camera's LED glow, was a single, pristine work glove, a type commonly used by contractors, but not one matching any of Mitchell's tools. She also noted, in the soil of the crawlspace entrance from the errant vent, a series of deep, parallel grooves in the earth, like claw marks, but made by something with 4 distinct digits. Elena's professional skepticism evaporated, replaced by a deep, instinctual dread. She advised Mitchell to leave the house immediately and called the sheriff's office from her county truck, citing a possible structural hazard and evidence of trespass. While waiting, she reviewed the property's history on her laptop. The previous owner had died in a nursing home, and the house sat vacant for 18 months. During that time, The county utilities log showed negligible water usage, but a curious, consistent drain on the electrical grid, small, but enough to power a light bulb that no one had ever investigated. The reveal was delivered by the sheriff's deputies themselves. After securing Mitchell's consent, they broke through the hollow-sounding section of the basement wall. What they found was not a natural void or a forgotten root cellar. It was a dugout chamber, approximately 6 feet deep and 4 feet wide, extending back under the yard. The walls were shored up with scraps of lumber and old bricks. On the floor was a nest of sorts, shredded insulation, strips of old carpet, and the desiccated remains of several small animals. There was also a collection of stolen items, mismatched gardening tools, a bicycle reflector, and a child's plastic toy, all covered in a layer of fine, gray dust. But the centerpiece, the detail that sealed the horror, was a single, outdated baby monitor receiver, its power cord spliced into the home's main electrical line, explaining the power drain. The transmitter was nowhere to be found. The aftermath and verification are documented in a joint county police and public health report. The chamber was cleared and eventually filled with gravel and concrete. No suspect was ever identified for creating it. The official conclusion was that a vagrant or a mentally disturbed individual had been secretly living in the space, a not entirely unheard of occurrence. The case was closed. The chilling, unresolved detail lies in the evidence locker. The baby monitor receiver was dusted for prints. None were found. However, a forensic audio technician, as a matter of procedure, checked its memory. While most of the recordings were static or the muffled sounds of the house above, the last saved file, dated 2 days before Mitchell moved in, contained 12 hours of audio. For the first 11 hours and 50 minutes, there is only silence. In the final 10 minutes, as captured by the device's sensitive microphone, a sound emerges from the chamber itself, a slow, labored, wet breathing, and beneath that, the faint, unmistakable sound of something with long nails, gently, rhythmically, scratching the earth wall of its nest. The creature hadn't just been hiding, it had been listening to the family that lived above it for an unknown length of time, and when it finally left, it left its ear behind. The Echo at Sentinel Point. Captain Leo Yankovsky was a 58-year-old veteran park ranger with 30 years of service at the sprawling, mountainous Sentinel Point State Park. His expertise was search and rescue, and he knew every trail, ravine, and weather pattern in his domain. The incident began with what should have been a routine recovery. On the morning of August 14th, 2 hikers reported finding an abandoned, high-end camping setup at a remote site known as the Devil's Backbone Overlook. The tent was intact, gear neatly arranged, but there was no sign of the camper, a man named Kyle Richardson, whose vehicle was still at the trailhead. The official missing person case file, Park Service incident report, and the subsequent SAR radio transcripts form the verified record. The inciting incident was not the disappearance itself, but the first audio anomaly. Yankovsky led the initial grid search. As his team swept the dense fir forest below the overlook, their handheld park radios, set to the secure SAR frequency, began picking up interference. It started as a faint echo a ranger would say, "Copy," and a half-second later, a distorted copy would whisper back on the same channel. Then, they began receiving broken, nonsensical transmissions that mimicked their own protocol but were just off. Team Alpha. Position. Trees are. The voice was flat, synthetic, and cold. Radio checks with dispatch confirmed no other authorized users on the frequency. The interference was localized to the search area. The buildup was a violation of known protocols. As the search stretched into a second day, the phenomena escalated. Motion-activated trail cameras, deployed to watch game trails, captured only blurred streaks of white moving at incredible speed through the periphery of the frame, always at night. One camera, pointed at Richardson's abandoned tent, recorded 8 hours of footage. For 7 hours and 50 minutes, it showed nothing. In the final 10 minutes, as the first hint of dawn lightened the sky, a pale, elongated hand entered the frame from the side, its fingers too long and jointed. It rested on the tent's rainfly for a moment, then withdrew. The timestamp was 5:47 am. Then came the echoes on the ground. Search teams reported hearing their own footsteps being replicated a few seconds later, from a different direction. They would hear a whispered fragment of their own conversation repeated back from the tree line. Yankovsky, in his official addendum to the report, described the most disorienting event. While standing alone at a creek to refill his water, he heard his own voice, clear as day and full of a panic. He did not feel cry out, "Help me," from the ridge above him. He scrambled up, finding nothing. The reveal came during the most dangerous part of the operation, night hold. With Richardson still missing after 72 hours, a small team, including Yankovsky, remained in the field to maintain a presence. They camped in a secure meadow. At 2:13 a.m., their camp was surrounded by sound. It wasn't clicks or growls. It was a perfect, horrifying cacophony of every radio transmission from the entire search. Phrases like, "Grid search complete," "Negative contact," and Yankovsky's own voice saying, "We'll find him," all played back simultaneously from the surrounding woods in that same flat, synthetic tone. It was a data dump, a playback of everything it had heard. In the stunned silence that followed, a single, clear transmission came over Yankovsky's personal radio. It was Richardson's voice, captured from an earlier park check-in days before, now saying, "I'm in the stones. I'm cold." A GPS coordinate followed, auto-logged by the radio system. The coordinate led not to a trail, but to a near-vertical scree slope of jagged granite boulders on the north face of the peak, a place no sane hiker would go. The aftermath and verification are a matter of painful record. A helicopter-assisted team reached the coordinate. They found Kyle Richardson's body wedged deep in a narrow crevice between massive boulders, a place virtually invisible from the air or any path. The coroner's report listed cause of death as exposure and traumatic injuries from a fall. How he got there was unexplained. The official SAR report attributes the radio interference to atmospheric conditions and probable signal bounce in the steep terrain, and the voice transmission to unexplained but likely coincidental signal capture. The case was closed with Richardson's recovery, but the chilling, unresolved detail is known only to Yankovsky and the park's communications specialist. In the days following the recovery, they conducted a full diagnostic on all park radio systems. Every piece of equipment was clean. However, a deep scan of the radio frequency's digital backup log, which records all transmissions, revealed something impossible. The log showed the haunting final transmission, Richardson's voice, and the GPS coordinate had not been broadcast to Yankovsky's radio. According to the system metadata, it had been broadcast from it. The signal originated from Yankovsky's own handheld unit, at a time when it was lying on a log next to him, untouched. The entity in the woods hadn't just been listening. It had learned to hijack and transmit from their equipment, using it to guide them to its hiding place. The last broadcast of Wick. Maya Vance was a 24-year-old production assistant for the small-town radio station Wick, located in the faded factory town of Millhaven. Her task on the stormy night of November 12th was simple: digitize a box of old station ephemera, including reel-to-reel tapes from the 1970s, for the station's upcoming 50th anniversary. The station manager had left for the night, leaving Maya alone in the building, a fact confirmed by security system logs. The events that followed were captured in their entirety by the station's always-on broadcast delay system and the security hard drive, both later seized by the Federal Communications Commission as part of their interference investigation. The inciting incident was a tape that shouldn't have existed. Among the boxes, Maya found an unlabeled reel in a brittle plastic case. Out of curiosity, she threaded it onto an old, still functional player in the production room. The tape was not station ID jingles or old ads. It began with 30 seconds of dead air, then the voice of a long-dead station owner, Frank Bell, speaking in a tense, hushed tone not meant for broadcast. Test log. October 31 Street, 1978. Signal interference continues on 88.7 FM. Pattern is consistent, not random. It responds. I think it's learning the schedule. God help me, I think it's trying to talk back. This was followed by a recording of the interference itself. A pulsating, a tonal hum layered with those now familiar rapid clicks. Maya, intrigued but not yet alarmed, noted the tape's contents in her digital log. The buildup was a modern repetition of history. After listening to the 1978 tape, Maya returned to her computer work. At exactly 10:17 p.m., the station's main broadcast feed, a syndicated classic rock show, was interrupted. The music faded into the same pulsating hum and clicks from the tape, lasting for 7 seconds before cutting back. The station's engineering board showed no internal fault. Then, the landline in the production room rang. The caller ID read, "Wickham Studio." Picking it up, Maya heard only the humid sound of breathing and the faint, distant pattern of clicks. She hung up, checked the hallway. It was empty. The security camera for the lobby showed no one at the front door. Minutes later, the lights in the production room dimmed briefly. The computer monitor flickered. On the screen, in a plain text document she had opened, a single sentence appeared, typed out letter by letter as if by an invisible hand. "You played the tape." The security camera footage from the production room, time-synced to this moment, shows Maya at her desk, the text appearing on her monitor. No one else is in the room. The station's broadcast was again interrupted, this time by a distorted, whispering voice that spliced together syllables from Frank Bell's 1978 recording and current DJ liners. "Frank, warned, late, you, stay." The reveal was a direct confrontation. Maya, now in a state of controlled terror, decided to flee. She grabbed her bag and moved to leave the production room. As she reached for the light switch, the room's studio monitor speakers, which should have been passive, blasted a deafening wave of sound, a layered chaos of every recorded click, hum, and distorted whisper from the night, culminating in a clear synthesized command in a voice that was neither male or female. "Stay and listen." At that moment, the security camera for the station's transmitter building, a separate shack behind the main studio, triggered. The grainy black and white footage shows the silhouette of a tall, emaciated figure standing motionless in the rain, facing the building, its head tilted upwards towards the broadcast antenna. Maya did not stay. She ran from the building, called 911 from her car, and waited for police. Her frantic call is part of the record. The aftermath and verification involved federal regulators. The FCC investigation confirmed the unauthorized broadcasts, citing malicious electronic interference of unknown origin. The security footage was deemed inconclusive, but troubling. The physical 1978 tape was analyzed. Its magnetic pattern showed no signs of a manufactured hoax, and the voice was verified as Frank Bell's. The official report could not explain how the interference so precisely mirrored the 1978 incident, or how the station's internal systems were compromised. The case was classified as unresolved interference and closed. Maya Vance left her job and the town shortly after. The chilling, unresolved detail is buried in the FCC's technical appendix, a spectral analysis of the final, synthesized "stay and listen" command revealed something unprecedented. The voice was not a simple recording or manipulation. It was a true synthesis, built from phonemes pulled from hundreds of hours of Wickham's past broadcasts, but the analysis also detected an underlying carrier wave, a frequency modulating the sound. That frequency, when charted, matched the exact pulsation pattern of the hum recorded on Frank Bell's 1978 tape. The entity hadn't just returned after decades. It had been transmitting a consistent, identifiable signal the entire time. It wasn't learning to talk back in 1978. It had already learned. It was simply waiting for someone to play its calling card. The Reservoir Keepers. Samir Gupta was a 42-year-old senior hydrologist for the state's Department of Water Resources. His current project was a year-long ecological survey of the remote, man-made Lake Voorhees, a reservoir created in the 1950s that supplied several distant towns. He lived on site in a small, state-owned cabin with his research assistant, Jenna. Their work involved taking weekly water samples from a grid of 10 fixed buoys, monitoring for pollutants and algal blooms. The data from their calibrated instruments, the GPS tracks of their sampling boat, and their official field reports provide the factual skeleton of what occurred. The inciting incident was a series of instrument failures. It began with buoy 7, located in the deepest part of the reservoir, over the old river channel that was flooded during creation. The buoy's suite of sensors measuring temperature, pH, and turbidity began transmitting erratic, nonsensical data before going permanently offline. Samir and Jenna motored out to investigate on the morning of June 5th. They found the buoy intact, but tilted. When they righted it, they found the underside of its hull and the sensor array were covered in a thick, gray, fibrous slime that smelled of ozone and decay. Samples of this slime, later analyzed by a state lab, were found to contain unknown biological compounds and microscopic silicate structures that did not match any known freshwater organism. According to the lab report, the buildup was a gradual contamination of their routine. After the buoy 7 incident, other buoys began to fail, always in a sequence moving outward from the deepest point. Each showed the same slime. Then, the water samples themselves became anomalous. Samples taken from the affected areas, under microscopic examination back at the cabin's lab, showed a strange, wispy particulate that moved against the current of the slide fluid. Jenna's logbook notes the increasing frequency of large, unexplained ripples on the lake's surface on windless days, as if something substantial was moving just below. Their depth finder, which mapped the lake bottom, began to show transient, tall, thin sonar shadows rising from the old riverbed, shadows that would appear on one pass and be gone on the next. The psychological pressure mounted with the environment. A dense, persistent fog began to settle over the reservoir at night, a phenomenon not in the regional weather data. They would hear sounds from the water, not splashes, but soft, dragging sounds, like something heavy being pulled over the muddy shore. One evening, reviewing time-lapse footage from a wildlife camera aimed at the boat dock, they saw a clear image just before the fog rolled in. A pale, elongated figure was crouched at the water's edge, its head submerged, as if drinking. It was gone in the next frame. The reveal was both physical and auditory. Determined to get a direct sample from the epicenter, Samir suited up in wetsuit and scuba gear to personally inspect the area around buoy 7. He dove alone, with Jenna manning the boat and a safety line. His dive computer log and the audio from his diver to surface communication unit tell the story. At a depth of 60 feet, hovering above the silty bottom where the old town of Millerton was buried, his lights illuminated not just slime, but structures. They were crude, teepee-like formations made of stacked stones, lake debris, and animal bones, standing in a rough circle. And moving between them slowly, gracefully, were three pale, humanoid shapes. Their limbs were too long, their movements fluid and boneless. They did not react to his light. Instead, they seemed to be engaged in a methodical activity sorting stones, arranging bones. Samir's breathing, captured on the audio, became ragged. He whispered, "They're down here. They're building something." As he said this, one of the creatures stopped its work. It turned its head, the large, dark ocular voids reflecting his dive light not with a glint, but by absorbing it. It opened its mouth, and a cloud of that same gray slime emitted, along with a sound transmitted through the water and into Samir's microphone, a high-pitched, modulating shriek that overloaded the audio feed with distortion. Jenna, hearing everything, hauled the safety line in a panic. Samir surfaced, scrambled into the boat, and they raced for shore. The aftermath and verification involved state health and environmental agencies. The lake was placed under a temporary advisory. Divers from the state police searched the grid coordinates Samir provided. They found no stone structures, but they did find a significant, recently disturbed area of silt and confirmed the presence of the anomalous slime. The official report concluded that unidentified biological activity was present, possibly a previously unclassified fungal or bacterial bloom with psychotropic effects that could have induced shared hallucinations in the researchers. The water advisory was lifted when subsequent tests showed no threat to human health. Samir and Jenna were both placed on administrative leave and later transferred to desk jobs. The case was closed as an unusual environmental event. The chilling, unresolved detail comes from the state lab's final, highly technical analysis of the slime. Beyond the unknown compounds, they identified a unique property. It was a near-perfect ionic insulator. In theory, a creature coated in such a substance would be virtually invisible to sonar and would significantly disrupt electronic sensors. The report's author included a speculative footnote. The slime's structure suggested it was not a waste product, but a manufactured material. The creatures weren't just living in the reservoir. They were cultivating an environment, using a technology they grew on their own skin to hide from the instruments trying to find them. They were the true keepers of the lake. The silence of the McCready farm. Henry McCready was a 67-year-old third-generation dairy farmer in the rural flatlands of Indiana. A man of few words and steadfast routine, his life revolved around the care of his herd of 80 Holsteins. The incident was first logged not by him, but by the automated health monitoring system installed in his barn, a modern setup that tracked each cow's vitals, milk production, and feeding times. The system's data, along with the subsequent report from the County Agricultural Extension Office and the Sheriff's Department, provides a digital paper trail of the horror. The inciting incident was the silence. On the morning of September 9th, Henry entered the long, steel milking parlor at his usual time of 4:30 a.m. The barn was pre-dawn, dark, illuminated by motion-activated LEDs. The first thing he noticed was the absence of sound. There was no lowing, no shuffling of hooves on concrete, no crunching of feed. The 80 cows were standing perfectly still in their stalls, heads down, not eating. All of them. The automated feeder logs showed they had not touched their evening ration. The health monitors on their ears showed elevated heart rates and abnormally low rumination. They were in a state of profound, uniform stress. Henry's initial call was to the large animal vet, who found no sign of illness or contaminant in the feed or water supply. The buildup was an external pressure. That evening, Henry's old farm dog, a border collie named Jess, refused to enter the barn. She stood at the threshold, hackles raised, emitting a low growl directed not into the barn, but at the dark fields beyond the pasture fence. That night, Harry was awakened by a sound he described to the sheriff's deputy as like a big canvas tarp being ripped, real slow. Out in the corn, he investigated with the spotlight from his porch. The light swept over the harvested cornfield, revealing nothing but stalks. But the next morning, he found a 12-foot wide circle in the far pasture, where the grass was not just flattened, but liquefied into a black, sticky pulp. In the center of the circle were 4 deep, narrow holes in the earth, arranged in a slight curve, as if something massive had stood there. The phenomena became more invasive. Motion sensor lights on the equipment shed began triggering incessantly between AM and AM. But Henry saw nothing on the camera feed but fleeting shadows that moved faster than the frame rate could capture. Then, the cattle behavior turned bizarre. The entire herd would suddenly, in unison, turn their heads to stare at the same point in the tree line at the back of the property. They would do this for minutes at a time, before just as suddenly returning to their frozen silence. The vet was baffled. Herd behavior is coordinated, but not with such machine-like precision. The reveal came from a decision to watch. Convinced a predator, perhaps a rogue bear or a sick coyote, was terrorizing his animals, Henry took his deer rifle and spent the night of September 14th in the hayloft of the barn, which had a view of the back pasture. He left the pasture gate open, a bait of sorts. At 3:17 a.m., the herd simultaneously turned and stared at the tree line. Henry raised his night vision scope. For a long moment, he saw nothing. Then, it stepped out. It was tall, perhaps 9 feet, and so thin, it seemed to warp the space around it. Its skin was a glossy, pitch black that absorbed the starlight. It didn't walk. It unfolded itself from the trees in a series of jerky, angular movements, its limbs bending in places with no visible joints. It moved to the center of the pasture and stopped. It did not look at the cows. Instead, it slowly raised its elongated head towards the barn, towards Henry's hiding place in the loft. It had no discernible face, just a smooth, blank oval. From this distance, through the scope, Henry saw that its surface wasn't solid black, but crawling with a subtle, wave-like motion, as if covered in a layer of living oil. It stood there, statue of silent predation, for 20 minutes. The cows did not move, did not make a sound. Then, without warning, it collapsed in on itself, its form dissolving into a scrambling mass of smaller, skittering shadows that poured back into the tree line. The moment it was gone, the herd let out a collective, shuddering exhale and slowly returned to normal, beginning to eat for the first time in hours. The aftermath and verification stem from Henry's call to the sheriff. Deputies found the liquefied grass circle and the strange holes. Soil samples were taken. The lab found elevated levels of an unidentified acidic compound and extreme cellular breakdown in all plant matter. The official report lists the incident as possible agricultural vandalism with an unknown chemical agent. No perpetrator was found. Henry McCready sold his herd at a loss 2 months later and moved to town. The farm remains fallow. The chilling, unresolved detail is in the data. The agricultural extension officer, reviewing the automated health monitors from that night, made a discovery. At the exact time Henry saw the creature, every single monitor flatlined for a period of 6 minutes. Not from malfunction, but because every vital sign they tracked, heart rate, movement, rumination, dropped to 0. To the sensors, for those 6 minutes, all 80 cows were clinically dead. They were not simply frightened. They were, in every measurable sense, turned off. The black creature wasn't just hunting. It was imposing a perfect, palpable silence, a void so absolute it stopped living hearts with its presence. The final account of Ranger K. Doyle. Our final entry stands apart from the others, sourced not from scattered civilian reports, but from a single, meticulously kept professional record. It is the Field Journal of National Park Service Ranger Kelsey Doyle, a 14-year veteran assigned to the remote high country districts of the North Cascades. Doyle's journal, recovered alongside her abandoned patrol vehicle and entered into evidence under case file NPS for 479B, does not document a fleeting encounter. It chronicles a deliberate, months-long engagement between a trained observer and something that observed her back. The inciting incident, per her early entries, was an administrative anomaly. Over a single fiscal quarter, reports of strange occurrences from backcountry users in her sector increased by 300%. These were not typical wildlife issues. They were specific. Hikers reporting lost time on a particular ridgeline, campers describing their GPS tracks forming impossible loops, climbers finding their synthetic ropes mysteriously brittle and frayed upon descent. Doyle, a pragmatist, initially logged them as disorientation or gear failure, but a pattern emerged. All incidents clustered within a 5-square-mile area designated as Grid Sector Foxtrot, a region of dense, old growth, and complex granite formations. The buildup was a systematic, professional survey. Doyle began solo patrols into Sector Foxtrot. Her journal becomes a forensic ledger. She notes the absence of standard fauna: no squirrels, no bird calls, a silence she described as heavy, like wool. She discovered geometric patterns of fallen twigs, arranged in perfect spirals on flat stones. She took soil samples. Lab reports later attached to the journal indicated a complete absence of microbial life in those specific spots, a state of sterility soil scientists could not explain. On day 72 of her survey, she made a critical note: no scat, no prints, no bedding. This is not a lair, it's a gallery. The installations are for show. For whom? Her methodology escalated. She set up game cameras with infrared flashes. The cameras would function for days, then be found with their lenses smeared with the translucent, viscous gel that dissolved all imagery. She began marking certain trees with discreet, non-toxic paint. Returning a week later, she found the marks meticulously replicated on adjacent trees, but with the chemical signature slightly altered, as if analyzed and recreated. The entity was auditing her work. On day 118, she wrote, "It mirrors my actions with the 24 to 72-hour delay. It is learning my protocol. I am no longer the investigator. I am the training manual." The psychological toll surfaces in the later entries. She reports hearing her own voice played back from the woods. Fragments of radio checks she'd made days prior. She finds perfect, scale model replicas of her own backcountry camps, built from pine cones and lichen, placed in clearings. The final, decisive entry is dated October 17th. Its tone is calm, resolved, and terrifyingly clinical. I have devised a final test. I will establish a standard campsite at the geographic center of the anomaly, Grid Foxtrot 7. I will follow all backcountry safety procedures. I will then activate a single, powerful emergency strobe light at 2,300 hours, a clear violation of leave no trace, and a signal impossible to ignore. I will not broadcast a radio call. The strobe is the stimulus. I will document the response. If this journal is recovered, note, the subject exhibits signs of systematic intelligence, environmental manipulation, and a studied curiosity that has become interactive. It is my belief it will respond to a rule-breaking action. I am proceeding. Ranger Doyle was reported missing after failing to return from that patrol. A search team located her camp at Foxtrot 7. The tent was pitched perfectly. Her sleeping bag was rolled. Her pack was organized. A functioning satellite phone lay on top of her pack. The journal was found beside a cold fire ring, open to the final entry. The emergency strobe was located 10 yards from the tent, its battery dead. It showed signs of having been activated, then handled, covered in the same unique viscous gel found on her cameras. The official NPS investigation concluded that Ranger Doyle likely experienced a complex psychological episode leading to self-termination, though her body was never found. The case was closed. The verification and the horror lies in the evidence that was not in the journal. The search team's own equipment suffered inexplicable failures in Sector Foxtrot. Their GPS units displayed the same looping tracks described by earlier hikers. One team member's digital voice recorder, left running overnight at the campsite, captured 7 hours of audio. For 6 hours and 58 minutes, there is only silence. In the final 2 minutes, the microphone picks up a sound, the crisp, precise turning of the pages of a book, one by one. It is the sound of someone, or something, reading Ranger Doyle's journal from beginning to end, after she was already gone. The entity didn't just interact with her, it completed her study, collected her final data point, and filed her report away. The professional had become part of the specimen catalog. 11 cases. From the sun-baked asphalt of Highway 98 to the flooded depths of the Voorhees Reservoir, from the digital broadcast towers to the silent, sterile soil of a dairy farm. Different witnesses, different professions, separated by thousands of miles and years. Yet the evidence converges with the cold, clinical consistency that transcends coincidence. According to police reports, declassified military memos, FCC investigations, and sworn eyewitness testimony, a pattern emerges. This is not a collection of isolated monster sightings. We have documented the behavioral profile of a distinct, intelligent species. Its characteristics are now verified: a bipedal, pale, or occasionally dark, form with elongated limbs and adaptive joint structure. It exhibits a profound understanding of electromagnetism, capable of disrupting and hijacking communication devices, sensors, and power sources. Its intelligence is demonstrated through complex mimicry, environmental manipulation, and a deliberate, staged escalation of engagement from observation, to imitation, to direct interaction. The trucker on Highway 98, the engineer in the culvert, the soldiers at the guard post, the ranger in the deep woods, all were subjected to the same meticulous process. Their stories are not merely scary, they are field reports. They tell us this entity learns. It studies routines. It maps territories. It uses our own technology as both a weapon and a classroom. The goal remains unclear. Territorial acquisition, a form of resource collection we cannot perceive, or something else entirely. The aftermath is always the same: a closed official file citing unexplained phenomena or psychological strain, and a life forever fractured by the understanding that the world contains a conscious, predatory curiosity that lives in the seams of our reality. The common thread is not just the creature's appearance, but the profound shift it forces upon those who encounter it. It is the moment a rational person, a geologist, a radio operator, a building inspector realizes they are no longer the observer. They are the subject of the study. Their safe, known world was merely a habitat they shared, unaware of the other, far older tenants. This channel exists to document that shift, to replace rumor with record. Your awareness is the first line of defense. Trust the anomalies. If your electronics behave erratically in a remote location, if you find strange, purposeful patterns in nature, if the silence feels like a held breath, and you feel the unmistakable, primal certainty of being watched, you have likely entered its field of observation. Do not dismiss it. Your instinct is a verified data point. Your vigilance is critical. Subscribe to Verified Nightmare. In a world where these case files are real, staying informed isn't about entertainment. It's about preparedness. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. We are your source for verified analysis. If this evidence has resonated with you, if these documented accounts have clarified a vague fear into a knowable threat, like this video, it helps our research reach others who need to see the pattern. The investigation continues. Comment below with your own experiences. Focus on times, locations, and corroborating details. We review every account. Every story is a potential piece of the larger map. This has been Verified Nightmare. Remember, the most dangerous monsters are not the ones that hide in shadows. They are the ones that learn to stand just outside the light, patiently waiting for us to notice them. Stay safe, stay aware.